Hello, my name is Nicholas. I'm 28, and this is my story. So, back in high school, I went to a high school that had academies, engineering, medical, and I think one was IT. And I went down the engineering career path, learned a few things like CAD, and kind of picked up a few things here and there, software wise, and conceptual wise of what's going on in engineering, and was beginning to decide what I wanted to do after high school, after making it through that career path for the 4 years that I was in, and started realizing that I don't necessarily want to incur $20,000 of debt a year per year that I was in college, probably coming out to around 80,000, maybe marked down to 30 to 40,000 according to FAFSA and whatever else grants or whatever I could have gotten while I was in. So I chose the military, something that I had been doing a little bit of on the outside of the out of high school. So I was in this program called Civil Air Patrol in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they have wings across the country that where you can start to learn what it's like to be able to get into the Air Force. So went through the Air Force, ended up getting into basically construction. So everything except for like electrical and plumbing, which we did we helped out with those career paths too, but generally welding, masonry, framing, locks and doors, and a plethora of different construction disciplines. But that was the career path. And in that, I, after a conversation that I had with someone in my family about what to do after the Air Force, I landed on estimating and project management, but more of the estimating side of things whenever I first got out. So that's what I focused on, like gearing my resume towards. So taking the experience that I had gotten from the Air Force. And they also give you a program whenever you're getting out of the Air Force where you can start to get some of this stuff together before you actually have to get out. And I geared it towards estimating, got my first estimating job at this place in Scottsdale here in Arizona. And it was doing residential work. And it was an interesting environment, very interesting office and people, but mostly people just kind of either coming into estimating. Like most, there weren't really a lot of very experienced people at that place from what I saw, but it was definitely also just getting up off the ground. So I'm pretty sure eventually they got more and more different people, but also I think they got, it was like some sort of transition or something like that, like towards the end of my time being there, to where maybe they got bought out or something like that. But whatever, neither here nor there. So moving on, I moved to another company that focused more on metals and in the commercial world, so self storage all around the country, and they were a much larger, more established company with more experienced people, which is where I really felt like picked up a lot of the skills that I still use nowadays. A lot of the softwares, because the company before, they did some software takeoffs like for roofs and stuff like that, but it was only really limited to residential, and that isn't like a it's not a small part, but it's a whole nother world in the commercial world in comparison. So they started off doing things somewhat in an more old fashioned way, printing things off, putting things into filing cabinets, having actual projects handed to you in manila folders and stuff like that, and then moved to digital. And that was because of the pandemic situation that happened. A lot of people went digital, so they did too. And I ended up leaving there and going to a place that was more like an engineering firm, but focusing on metals and waterproofing versus the self storage, which was the last place that I was working at, and like a more broad general application of metals throughout the engineering and construction world. And they were pretty cool. Learned a lot there too. I'd say somewhat less than the first place because I was just getting introduced to the ideas. This was more of a continuation, and a lot of my experience since this point is just kind of generally been more of a continuation of what I had done before, and just kept moving right along. So I ended up going to a GC after the place that just focused on metal and waterproofing. And it is it is a big difference because one of the questions that I kept asking myself before in my career is really, was there that much of a difference between working for a sub which does specific trades and focuses on specific trades versus someone who is a general contractor? And there are massive differences. So getting sub bids together to put together for your bids versus actually having to do your bids, even though you still, I still also do takeoffs for the trades that I can reliably do that for. And I wouldn't say the workload is that much different. If anything, you might have less projects because the projects are more extensive than if you're just looking for one specific trade and then taking that off and then moving on to the next project, kind of doing that over and over again. So it's a little bit more involved, but it's not as fast paced. So it's it's pretty cool. Like it. And I continue to plan to learn further on. Like the next step for me would be a senior estimator, and then after that, a chief estimator, and then from that position, a pre-construction manager. And that is the pathway and like the vein that estimating is in, which is pre-construction. And then you have actual construction, which is where you have your superintendents and your project managers, which is what I also tend to double as, where you actually go out and see the construction being done versus just the design process where you're estimating how much it's going to cost for the customer, trying to design a project if the customer doesn't fully know or have like fully developed plans through the city with permits and stuff like that, getting started on it. That only happens after it's been fully designed and the customer has everything that they want on the plans, and then they can start being built. Because if you don't have it on the plans, it's hard to be transferred over to the construction side whenever that needs to happen. So that is more of an overview of my beginning of my career to the point to where I'm at right now, and then to where I plan to go. I didn't focus too much on where I plan to go because as I get there, I'll make another video like this, and then it'll just be a longer video, just telling more of my career at that certain point. And I kind of want you to be able to see like what my mindset was at certain points in my career to where I made the certain decisions that I did, because these were all decisions made. I mean, decisions made got you to where you were. And so being able to know at certain points that you have certain choices and where I took my choices at may be very useful and valuable information for you. So, all right, check the link in the description below, and I'll catch you on the next one.